Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and today I'm talking with Florence Christophers, who used to suffer terribly from migraines and never thought that sugar or all the processed junk that she used to eat had anything to do with her migraines. She'll be telling us her story in a minute. But just before, I'd like to invite you over to my website, aftersugarclub.com, to make the most of all of the resources there about how you can start reducing sugar so that you can get more energy, feel the healthiest ever, and get rid of those cravings and the need to find comfort and reward in foods that, well, in the long run, make you feel worse, not better. And you can also find information about what to eat, what whole foods are, and also about gut health, which is absolutely central to your general health. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your simple guide to getting more energy with less sugar. You can also find me on Facebook, on my Facebook page Life After Sugar, and on Instagram, where I post pictures of what I eat, what I do, how I live my life after sugar. That's at My Life After Sugar. All right, here's my chat with Florence. Florence, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me. Great to see you and to have you here. And I'd like you to tell me a little bit about what your life was like before, when you were still consuming sugar.
Right. Well, I guess it depends how far back you go. But in my childhood, I can describe a childhood that was blighted by the impact that refined carbohydrates were having on my mood, on my energy, on my quality of life, my health and my mental health. And I would say that it just got worse day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year, decade over decade until my early 20s. And by the time I hit, I think I was right on the 20 mark. I had a huge file and, I was a university student and I had a huge medical file at the student medical office, because if it wasn't one thing, it was another. I had blinding migraines. I was in and out of urgent care all the time. They were always sending me to specialists. I would have 10, 12, 14-day migraines. I'd be in and out of urgent care 2 or 3 times. And I don't even know what they were shooting me up with back then. Back then, they actually put needles in my butt. Now it's intravenous, and gosh, they did scans in my head. I saw so many specialists, but I'd been having migraines since the age of 3. And nobody ever talked to me about what I was eating, what were triggering these migraines. They just said, it's progressive. And, they just kept giving me harder and harder, pharmaceuticals. And eventually I had an open prescription for T3s, which is Tylenol 3, which is Tylenol plus codeine. I literally chewed them like candy. I have taken thousands upon thousands of Advil and aspirins and Tylenol 3. And the number of times I've been shot up with Demerol and Toradol, and I don't even know what they're shooting me up back in my 20s. So that was just one issue, Netta, one. It was the darkest though, because there were stretches of my life when my migraines were so acute that I wanted to die. I truly did. That I would be 3-4 days in the dark, not being able to eat, so nauseous and so much pain. My brain would throb, and usually one side or the other. It would start on the right-hand side and would throb like unrelenting pain right through any kind of pharmaceuticals I would throw at it. It would just march right over those drugs. Even morphine, actually. There were times they were giving me morphine and I'd say, don't bother. It's not touching it. It's too short acting. It would just like, there would be a 3-second relief and then it would just come fighting back like a monster. And so I spent many a day in the dark thinking, what is wrong? It feels like your brain is breaking, like you're going to be brain damaged at the end of it. And then you pull out of it and you feel good and you're off and running to the races. And for me, it meant I was back to the pizza, the pop, the white bread, the cheese, the sugar, the MSG, all those things that I know today trigger migraines. But no one was there to help me figure that diet piece out until one day, let me tell you. One amazing day, I was in the dark in a doctor's office at the University of Alberta in some specialist office yet again. He was going to do some scan on my head, and a nurse came into the waiting room, into my little room where I was waiting for the doctor, and the lights were off. And she's like, hello? I said, hi. She goes, oh, she goes, do you get migraines? And I said, yes. And she goes, oh, sweetheart, me too. I used to. I don't get them anymore. She said, can I turn on the light? And I said, of course. She goes, listen. And she leans in and she grabs a pad of paper and a pen and she goes, please never tell anybody what I'm about to tell you. She said, if you do, I will deny it and I will say you're making this up. I can lose my nursing license. But she said, sweetheart, they're triggered by what you're eating and drinking. And I said, no, they're not. I have been getting these since I was 3 and no one's ever said to me there's a connect. In fact, I've asked, is there anything I'm doing? Is there anything I'm eating? Is there something I can do? And they've all said, no, there's no connection between, quote unquote, no connection between diet and disease. And she said, there's totally a connection between diet and disease. Migraines are triggered by what you're eating and drinking, and occasionally from weather and, some other medical conditions or trauma for sure. But generally speaking, diet is a huge piece of this. And she goes, and you might get lucky. And when you clean up your diet, you'll clean up your migraines. So she wrote on a piece of paper all the foods that I was supposed to avoid. And she was writing and she was writing and I was looking down at it and I thought, are you kidding me? Like, what else is there to eat? It was like processed meat. Well, I eat a ham sandwich practically every day. I eat pepperoni and mushroom pizza. I had cereal for breakfast. I wasn't allowed to have sugar or wheat or dairy or processed meats or alcohol or caffeine. Although some people can do caffeine. I couldn't, absolutely. To this day, I couldn't do chocolate. I can't do anything. I have a really, really sensitive brain that is beautifully, epically happy, migraine-free today. Occasionally I can still get dehydrated or something or trigger a migraine, but it's pretty darn rare. Anyway, so I looked at the list and I looked at her and I said, I eat that all day long, every day, 3 meals a day, snacks in between. Like, what else is there to eat? And she lovingly looked at me and she said, you are about to discover the most beautiful world of foods. Like, you're going to fall in love with the healthy whole foods. And I'm like, what else is there but on this list? She goes, well, there's brown rice, there's eggs, there's protein, there's salad, there's stir fries, there's like the whole worldwide kingdom of plants and fruits and nuts and seeds. And sweetheart, you won't even believe how much you're going to love the food once you start. So she sent me away to try and discover whole foods, which was the turning point, really. But let me tell you about other things that were going on for me when I was binge eating sugar all day long. Well, actually, I did not binge eat sugar till I was in my late teens, and I was double my dress size back then. I was pushing a size 16, which was 30 years ago, right? So that was like, I don't know what that is today in today's sizes, but yeah, I was a very overweight round young adult woman, and I started to diet. And when I started to diet, as soon as I started to pull back on sugar, that's when I started to get into eating really messed up eating disordered behaviors, because I was restricting and binging, depriving myself and then binging. And I just started getting crazy and obsessed about food. I just ate sugar, flour, dairy, processed foods all day long. Just I didn't think about it, right? Until I started to get overweight, it started to catch up with me. And it was mostly post, puberty for me, starting to get my cycle and things started to shift there. And I was getting brutal PMS. I was suicidal, depressed a couple of days before my cycle. I had terrible cramps. I was moody, mostly sad. Like I wasn't particularly temperamental by nature. Like I didn't get angry like some people describe, but I get weepy. And I'd be like, existential. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Like, oh my God. And so I had PMS, I had blinding migraines. I was, 40, 50 pounds heavier than I am today. I had cystic acne. I had depression. I had existential angst. I had every infection going around. I got every cold and flu. Later on, I got bladder infections and yeast infections that just alternated. So I was on ridiculous amounts of antibiotics for including my later stage 4 rosacea. That didn't come until later in my 20s. Good gosh. Like, honestly, Netta, it was crazy.
And the only person that ever mentioned anything about diet also said, don't tell anyone or I'll lose my job.
Right.
Huh.
Right? How sad.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. She was nervous that, the doctor would say, you're not the doctor. You don't get to dispense advice about how to heal or cure or make improvements to a medical condition. You're a nurse. You do what I say. I'm the expert, right? There was definitely a hierarchical, on top of the fact that, the dispense she was administering would have been seen, even today, can be seen as like irresponsible and irrelevant.
Yeah.
But
And yet he was giving you all these meds and you were still getting migraines.
Oh God, yeah. They just got worse. Absolutely. They just got worse.
And there's nothing wrong with meds. It's just that they weren't doing you much good.
Oh, there is a profound shadow side to the pharmaceuticals that I was ingesting and the amounts that I was ingesting, from damaging my kidneys and my liver, rebound migraines. There's a place for pharmaceuticals, absolutely. But as a stopholder till you make the lifestyle changes you need to make till you feel better.
So there you were in your 20s with all of these health issues. How old were you when the nurse sort of surreptitiously mentioned this to you?
You know what? My memory's a bit fuzzy because there was a couple of pivot points, like profound pivot points in my life at that time. So one of them, I wouldn't even, at the time, I didn't think that the nurse's recommendations about changing your diet was a pivot point. In hindsight, I can see it because I took her list and I threw it away. I crumpled it. I'm just like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. This is not about diet, duh. Right? But when I was desperate and my next migraine hit and I'm lying in the dark and I know my body's saying to me, I'm not happy. And I would hold my head and I would be like, I'll do anything. What do you need, sweetheart? Like, I didn't know what to do except just keep, taking more and more drugs and going to more and more doctors and experts. And so I actually, fortunately, always carried a little backpack around with me. And at the bottom of that backpack was that crumpled little piece of paper.
Huh.
And I flattened it out and I looked at it. And unfortunately, you know what would have been really smart in hindsight? Actually, I just thought of this right now. If on the other side, she'd said what I could eat, that would have been helpful, because all she told me is what I couldn't eat, which seemed like my whole world at that point in time. I was a classic university student. I lived on Kraft dinner and cereal and extra sugar on the cereal and pizza and pop. And man, like, I didn't know how to cook, really. So, but I figured it out. I started to look at, okay, well, what else do I like to eat? And I realized that I absolutely loved salads and I loved vegetables and I enjoyed chicken and salmon and black beans, and that I actually didn't struggle to find better foods to eat that were acceptable, that weren't on the list. But the second pivot point was that I had a friend who also knew that I had blinding migraines. And she sent me a copy of the Sugar Blues. Now, was it after or before? I really don't remember. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was shortly after, within like 3 to 6 months. And she gave me a copy of the Sugar Blues, and that book reached me in a way that the nurse didn't. Although she did reach me, of course, but at the time, it was such a short, little, quick conversation that seemed so kind of like unexpected that I had to come back to it to really benefit from her advice. But the Sugar Blues reached me. I picked up that book mid-afternoon. I was a voracious reader, and I couldn't stop. I could not put that book down. Like, it was 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm nodding off, and I just couldn't get to bed. It was riveting to me. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it might be the sugar. The sugar might be poisoning my cells and my brain. And I'm just going to get off sugar. I was so excited. And I didn't actually finish the book in one night. I had to, eventually, I literally fell asleep, and then I finished it up the next day. But I was on fire, Netta. Like, I was going to break up with sugar, and I was going to eat whole foods, and I was going to heal my body. And I was so overjoyed at the prospect of it. Because when something's your truth, and it was my truth. Like, it resonated with me. There are people who could read the Sugar Blues and go, nah. It's because it was my truth. It's because it was my medicine. It's because my soul and my body knew. So I started to try and cut out sugar and realized, oh my gosh, A, it's in everything I eat, and B, it's really hard. I had brutal cravings. My hands would shake. I would trigger migraines, like the withdrawal, the detox symptoms. The detox was brutal. I got depressed. I got anxious, and I kept thinking, I don't think I can do this. There's no internet. This is 1988, 1989.
Oh, wow.
There is no internet. There are very few books on it. I had no one to talk to about it. I was saying to my friends, oh my God, I think I'm addicted to sugar. And they'd laugh their heads off like, oh, Florence, you're so funny. You can't be addicted to sugar. You need it to live. And then eventually I had gone back into the doctor's office, and I remember telling my doctor, she was a female doctor. It's like I'm right there in her office, and she's got this big desk, and I say to her with the most incredible amount of enthusiasm and joy that I read the Sugar Blues, and I'm so excited, and I'm changing my diet, and I'm hoping it'll help my migraines. And she says to me, oh, yeah, well, it won't hurt you, but it's not going to, no, it's not going to improve your migraines or your depression or anything else that's going on in your body, right? She sucked the wind out of my lungs, let me tell you. Like, I slumped away from that office. I was so discouraged. Like, she didn't just knock the air out of me. Like, she just knocked me right flat. And it took me quite a few weeks to come back into at least open-mindedness that I was on the right path. And then once I got my feet back under me, there is no human being on the planet that had the power to take me off my own deep inner knowing that food was what was wrong with my health, right? That was truly, these were chronic lifestyle induced problems. This was not infectious polio or right. This was because I was eating junk all day and had been from childhood. So that was a pivot point, and my diet got better. I got better at cooking, and I took foods out in slow order. The very first thing I actually managed to take out was wheat, which surprisingly was, it was so hard to take out wheat. Bread, toast, pancakes, sandwiches, pizza, Kraft dinner, cereal. My favorite cereal was Shreddies. Like, I thought, how could I possibly eat with it? There was no gluten-free bread back then, let me tell you. Nobody was talking about gluten-free eating at all.
No, the 80s? No, forget it.
No, yeah. So I had to kind of figure out what to do for lunches. There was no brown rice pasta back then. So that was a real process of like figuring out how to replace the wheat in my world. But my goodness, the reward was stunning. My acne got better, my migraines got better. They did not go away. I had to get everything out, but they got better, and it was encouraging. Then dairy was the next thing. cow dairy in particular. And I was off all dairy for a while. And then I've been able to go back to some goat yogurt, some goat dairy. I think I could do sheep a little bit too, but mostly I have to be very careful with cheeses because those will trigger migraines for me. Phlegm, bloating, like there's just, dairy was a tricky one for me as well. That I never thought I could live without cheese. I let that go.
Wow.
But the consistent was the sugar, right? It got better. I ate less, and I can't, I graduated off the white refined stuff to the Rapadura sugar or the dehydrated cane sugar. And then eventually they start to come out with fancy things like agave, and it was like, agave doesn't raise your blood sugar. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I used to make all these raw food agave desserts and not having any idea that it was as bad as high fructose corn syrup. It was worse potentially than the white stuff. It is worse than the white stuff even. Oh, so then all these bubbles kept getting bursted, because I kept thinking all these sort of alternative sugars that were, well, I could have my cake and eat it too. I just have to sweeten it with xylitol or, monk fruit or coconut sap or maple syrup. And truthfully, I didn't binge on maple syrup and honey. I didn't. And I don't even binge on coconut sugar or monk fruit or even stevia. I don't binge on them, but I could not end my addiction. I couldn't be free. I couldn't fully reverse my obsessive compulsive behaviors around food till I let them all go. And I couldn't reverse some of my lingering health issues. And one of them was peripheral neuropathy, which, by the way, is another one that I forgot to mention that is potentially one of the most frightening for me, because I can see it from down my father's bloodline, circulation issues. He was a non-diabetic, had peripheral neuropathy. I'm non-diabetic, peripheral neuropathy, and it's the damage that sugar does to the nerves. Now, you don't have to be diabetic to get it, but typically diabetics get it. And he had his legs amputated twice. He was a double amputee. He went blind in one eye. My grandmother's went legally blind. My father went legally blind. I have a sister who's close to legally blind. My vision is profoundly compromised because of circulation too. So, right, because it can affect, vision and your extremities, and it's all circulation related, cardiovascular. So I couldn't reverse that. Heal that. It was always progressing as long as I was still on some of these sugars, even though I get it, honey exists in nature. It's a whole food. Honey even can combat candida. I'm not saying everyone has to give up honey, but I know that for me, I had to. I just have to give up all sugars. I don't have freedom in my mind unless I'm not making any food that exists in nature, perfect as it is. Better by adding sugar to it, right? Like I don't need to make, strawberries are plenty sweet, almonds are plenty sweet, iceberg lettuce is sweet, brown rice is extraordinarily sweet once you've recalibrated your taste buds. Yeah. Now, here's
everything tastes sweet.
Sorry?
Everything tastes sweet when you take out sweet tasting foods.
Yes, exquisitely, perfectly, satisfyingly, sufficiently sweet. Yes, absolutely. But I just think as long as you keep putting concentrated sugars into your diet, you keep having an unnatural appetite for concentrated sweetness, whereas naturally occurring sweet in season too. We don't need to even eat fruits all year round. I mean, we can, berries, can freeze, and but tropical fruits for Canadians in winter, even that can sometimes leave us a bit jonesy, bit unsatisfied, a bit nibbly after a meal, right? So it's just, and the pleasure that you get from just eating whole foods as they exist in their perfectness, way better than any Black Forest. Oh God, I say Black Forest cake and my body just goes, oh, I loved Black Forest with the shaving of chocolate and the cream of real whipped cream and those perfectly artificially flavored colored cherries on. Oh my God. But even then, do I get more pleasure out of my food today? Absolutely. I
Yeah,
do.
there's a distinction between getting pleasure and being happy, and for me at least, I enjoy my food more now because I don't have all the backlash of the guilt and the shame and all the physical, effects that all those fake foods used to have. I don't have any of that. I used to love Black Forest cake as well. um, but I always felt guilty after. It's like that. You don't have that anymore. That's part of the freedom.
It is. It really is. Yeah. Any single day, once I read the Sugar Blues, every single day that I ate refined carbohydrates, sugar in particular, which sugar are refined carbohydrates, interchangeable, one and the same, I didn't feel peace. I just couldn't feel peace because I knew it was a truth for my body. My body knew it was poisoning my cells. It was wreaking havoc with my health and wellness and my mental health. And I was suicidally depressed, right? On and off. Like it was as dark as I would ever want anybody to get. And I was also at the same time an extraordinarily optimistic, joyful, energetic, enthusiastic by nature. And so in between these bouts, that's who I was naturally, right? And so thank God for that, because I get to live in that place today, right? But let me tell you, so from the day that I read the Sugar Blues, and there was that pivot with the nurse where she was like, honey, you need to unhook from this junk. And then the Sugar Blues came in and just hammered the message home. And I started my journey in earnest all by myself. Let me tell you, all by myself, because I wasn't anywhere getting any support for this idea that, diet and my migraines and all my other issues were related. But slowly books started to come onto the market. And I remember maybe a couple of years later, there was a book on Candida that came out. And then what I was doing with the Sugar Blues is I read all the references in the back, and I wrote away to the universities and I asked them for the study, the original. And I read all of those, and I read all of those references. And then one of the references in the book, The Sugar Blues, was Pure, White, and Deadly by Yudkin. And I got that book. And then I looked at his references and I ordered those references if I could get them. Many of them people would say, oh, we can't find it, or sorry. Or I'd get these little pieces of photocopied or links, or like, it was amazing. But I was a woman on a mission, let me tell you, because it was just me and these books, these few little references. But the stuff I've discovered, like, I was obsessed about this topic. Then eventually, I became so obsessed about the topic that I knew in my heart that I had a master's thesis in me on this topic. And so I wrote away to Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. So I'm now in my late 20s, no, 26, 27, someone in there. I've graduated from university. I've gone on to graduate school. And while I'm in graduate school, I was actually doing an MBA. And I thought, I don't want to be doing this. You know what I really want to be doing? I do my homework for my graduate school, but truthfully, every waking minute of my day, I am researching about sugar. So I thought I really should be doing a master's on sugar, because I am absolutely convinced, A, that it's addictive, B, it's detrimental to our health and wellness, but C, it's implicated in eating disorders in women, because I didn't have an eating disorder, really. I just ate it all day long, but no one would have.
That's normalized now.
Yeah. Like, no one would have looked at me. Do you binge eat? Nope. Do you obsess about it? Nope. I just eat it when I want it done, move on, right? But I eat it all day long, don't get me wrong. And I eat every 2 or 3 hours, because I just intuitively knew that when I started to get into hypoglycemia, I needed a snack. So I'd go find myself one. Anyways, so I applied to Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland, and under wanting to do the thesis topic that there's a potential connection between sugar addiction and eating disorders in women, because I didn't have an eating disorder till I tried to moderate it. And in that effort to moderate, I tripwired which we know predictably now. You go on a diet, you feel deprived, it's just a matter of time before you binge. And I got into that binge cycle. Now I'm binging. Now I'm like, great. Now I'm still eating sugar and I'm binge eating it. And I felt worse and more crazy around food than ever. I've made my problem worse is what was happening. But it was a predictable problem when you understand what addiction is. And I didn't understand that you can't diet your way. You can't get on a sugar-free diet and end an addiction, because it's a willpower, white knuckle, exhausting, obsessive, bound to fail approach to addiction recovery.
Yeah, because you're looking at the wrong thing from what I know of it. You're looking at the sugar, but the problem is elsewhere.
Right. It is elsewhere. You're right, because it's really about the addictive brain having an urge. And that urge, it has preferences. There's kind of like a hierarchy of my first choice is sugar. Oh, if there's no sugar, my second choice would be wheat. My third choice would be dairy. My fourth choice would be sex, maybe porn, not for me. Shopping. That isn't one of my addictions either. Reading, TV, whatever, right? For me, I feel like my world was alcohol, drugs, marijuana, cocaine. Honestly, I don't know why, but for me, maybe because I had 3 different kind of sort of food addictions, going on, the wheat, dairy, sugar. I never really needed to veer very far into other addictions. I didn't, thankfully. I was never, it didn't have multiple addictions going on, although I had backups when I was trying to deprive myself of my primary addiction. But so it isn't about any of those. The object of the urge is desire. It's about the fact that our addictive brain takes over and starts making food choices for us and starts sort of dictating what it will have, when it will have it, how much it will have it. And that's a problem. And I wouldn't mind coming back to that, but I'll just say one last thing before I sort of get into, what was my recovery like? What helped me find the freedom I have today, the peace? So let me just say that was in my late 20s that I was still doing all this passionate research. My diet was getting better. My migraines are getting better. My moods and my health was getting better. I wasn't perfect, but I was heading in the right direction. And I was still painfully discouraged by how hard it was for me to get 100% sugar free, because that was still my heart's desire. Because I read the Sugar Blues. I wanted it completely out of my life. I wanted to be free, but I didn't get free, Netta. The first time I really got 100% sugar free was when I was 34. And I found a little ad. There's so much backstory there, but I'll just cut to the chase. I found a little ad in my local newspaper asking, do you compulsively overeat, sugar and flour, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. It was a 12-step program for food addiction. I didn't even know they existed. So I joined that. I got, completely clean. Like I weighed and measured every ounce of my food, 3 meals a day, no snacks in between. I was 100% abstinent. And the miracles that I experienced in my own mind and body were incredible for sure. But wow, the miracles I witnessed inside those rooms of other people coming in, morbidly obese, diabetic of 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, completely reversing their obesity, completely reversing their diabetes, completely getting off medications, including antidepressants, completely transforming before my very eyes. And I just kept thinking, why is this not on the front page of the New York Times? Why is not everybody in the entire world buzzing with excitement about what's possible when you just eat whole foods, right? And it just was baffling to me. And I kept saying to people, oh, you can totally reverse diabetes. This was 18 years ago. You can totally reverse diabetes. It's actually easy. If you haven't reversed diabetes within the first 30 days, and even type 1s being significantly less insulin dependent, you're not eating whole foods, because it's really just that simple. And it almost doesn't even matter if you're whole foods plant-based, although that doesn't work for everybody, even though sometimes they hope it does. It doesn't even matter if you're paleo or keto. It doesn't matter, right? You can nuance what the right meal plan is for you. But the bottom line is get unhooked from the refined carbohydrates, and miracles happen. They just happen. And you often have to do it 100%. If you really, Dr. Hyman says you ain't got no business eating sugar and flour if you are overweight, if you have a health condition of any kind, if you're depressed, if you think you're addicted, right? You need to get it completely out completely be in body and mind where you want to be, and then see if you can dabble, but not before, because you'll never get where you want to go. You just spin for decades. That's what I did. I was still spinning. So, Netta, as much as I was deeply transformed by this program that had me eat 3 meals a day, no snacks in between, no sugar, no flour, whole foods. I weighed and measured all of my food, which was extraordinary amounts of work. I was a university professor at the time. I had a daughter who was 1. She was still nursing. Whew, it was a lot, let me tell you. And I had to go to 3 meetings a week, and I had an AWOL, and I made all these calls, and it was amazing, except there was still one thing missing for me. I was sugar, flour free for sure. And I had reversed my rosacea. I had lost weight. I actually got underweight. It was a bit of a struggle to keep it on my body because the meal plan worked so effectively. My mind transformed. It was probably the first time in my entire life, possibly even from the womb, because my mother, probably had some sugar at least, that I'd ever had no processed foods in my body whatsoever, ever. And here I am, 34, 35 years old, and I am 100% whole food woman. And the things it does to your body and your mind are gobsmacking. But here's what it didn't do. I was still food obsessed. I was still white knuckling my way through days, not with respect to sugar and flour, because the cravings disappear and you get into a groove, but it was so much work just to stay sober. And in my program, my sponsor would say to me, Florence, you got to do your 3 meetings. You got to do this and this and this and that, because your addict is out in the parking lot doing push-ups, just waiting for you to drop the ball, just waiting for you to get cocky. Like, you got this, right? You've never got this. Addictions are sneaky and deadly, and you got to be vigilant every day. So I was vigilant every day, but I was exhausted by it. Like, I just thought, I don't want to have to put this much work into being free. I want to be free. I don't want to just be abstinent. I truly want to be free. And it didn't mean that I wanted to leave my program so much, but I wanted to be able to come and go without this fear and dread of going back. So eventually, fast forward, I actually moved to a very small community in Canada in the mountains called Nelson, British Columbia, 5,000 people, and no meetings there. And I was underweight, and I was kind of like, I think I'm going to leave program. I think I got this, I'm going to just carry on by myself. So truthfully, I left program, and 99% of the time I stayed sugar flour free, although I would still snack. I could overeat chicken. I would overeat peanut butter. So I never really got a grip on some of the emotional eating work that, needs to be done as you move through an addiction. But I stuck to the eating, being mostly a whole food woman. And so that was great. But fast forward, and there were a few slips where I'd get back into the sugar and I'd feel so awful, and I'd get a migraine, and I think, I don't want this. Like, I really don't. This is just the addiction sort of doing what it does. So fast forward, I'm now 48, I think, 47, 48, something like that. And I'm on the couch watching a movie with my husband called That Sugar Film.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So
the
good.
One.
Yes. I think he's New Zealand. Someone corrected me recently. Is he New Zealand? I know. I thought he was Australian. Anyways, yes. And in the middle of that film, there's this unbelievable scene where he's tootling around in Midwest America, I believe, where people put Mountain Dew in babies' bottles, which just freaking breaks my heart. Like, I literally want to fall to the floor and gasp with grief. And I just thought, that is the saddest thing I've ever heard of. And this little 18-year-old who'd had Mountain Dew in his bottle from birth had rotted all of his teeth, like all of his teeth. We're not just talking cavities, like all of his teeth were rotten, and they had to all get pulled out. So this mobile dentist goes through with his little van and moves through these communities and, does dental repair work with people. And in this case, this poor 18-year-old had to completely have all of his teeth yanked out of his head. And so Damon, the filmmaker who's creating That Sugar Film, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's fabulous.
It is.
And he says to this 18-year-old, so buddy, so you're going to stop eating sugar? And this 18-year-old looks at sweet thing. He just looks at him and he's blinking. And I grab the remote and I paused it, and I turned to my husband, and I'm like, what? Of course he's not going to stop drinking Mountain Dew. It isn't just about, oh, well, now that you know better, you can do better. Like, I love that people are talking about sugar. I love it, because I was the only one that was talking about sugar for decades of my life, probably about 12 to 15. I was the food freak, right? That there was no science. There were few books. It was not in the mainstream media. There was, a lot of it was pre-internet. So it was such a relief and such a joy to see that there were other people that were on this wavelength, around the world, and they were doing beautiful, beautiful, fun, creative work with it. But my God, he didn't seem to have an understanding of the addiction piece of it. So I paused and I looked at Sean, my husband, and I said, you know what? That's it. I'm going to put on a summit just about sugar addiction, so that people who are sugar addicted and feel like they're losing their mind, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I stop eating sugar? Don't have to feel like they're losers. They can just know they're in the midst of an addiction, and there's ways through that, and you're not alone. And here's the path forward. Here's the path to freedom. He goes, oh, well, what would that entail? I'm like, I have no idea. Haven't the foggiest clue. I'm not even particularly computer literate, to be honest. Anyways, so I'm like, oh no, I'll figure it out.
Good for you.
So I did. It almost killed me, because I realized that I needed software. I need to learn the software. I had to build websites. Then I had to research speakers, and I had to like invite them, and I didn't know what to say. And I was, in hindsight, it's absurd. I was so nervous about inviting them. Like, oh, would they want to be at my summit? I'm a nobody from Canada. Anyways, so, but I just kind of muddled my way through it. At one point I realized I had actually, at the same time, was so inspired and so called to do this that I actually gave notice to work to take time off to do it. So I now had no income coming in. So we were just living off my husband's income, which didn't quite cover bills. So we just got tight, we just tightened things up for a little bit. But I had the brainwave to go down to my local bank and say, can I have a loan to do this project? So I'm in this meeting with this banker, and she's kind of like tilting her head. You want to do what? Sugar addiction, what? Anyways, I'm like, I know I'm onto something. I'm telling you, I am. It's going to be great. And she's like, you know what? No one else would give you this loan, let me tell you. But she goes, here's $5,000. Go wow the world, kid. I believe in this. Somehow I believe in this. So I had my little $5,000, and I hired some people to kind of help me sort of cobble it all together. And I did it. It was the very first one in the world. And it was called the Kick Sugar Summit. It was in 2015 that I got this started. And from that, when I was looking for speakers, I managed to pull together, I think it was 21 or 24. And It was a bit of a stretch, because there weren't a lot of books. Like, there was some back then. True story. Dr. Lustig's now famous YouTube video about fructose, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, had less than 300,000 views.
And now it's millions.
Now it's millions. The last I looked, it was like 11 million or something. Like, that's all happened in the last 6 years. All of it, like, this has gone explosive. It's so cool. So, so I don't remember if I reached out to Robert Lustig at the time, but anyways, whatever. So I got my beautiful little summit together. It was the first in the world. We were all so excited to be teamed up, because we were all like, we got to tell the world about this. Do not eat this stuff. And moderate it if you can, but really, seriously, truly, if you're not addicted, like, seriously do your best to eliminate it, because you're not addicted. So you could take it or leave it. So please leave it. So it was very exciting. And then now, fast forward, I'm doing my 7th summit.
Wow.
And I have 80 speakers that have reached out or agreed to be on my summit. We've had to cut it back to 60. It's insane. The books that are flooding, and the science and the scientists and the doctors, just in the last 2 or 3 years, for some of them, they've had this eureka. Oh my God, it's the sugar, right? It's a processed, refined junk. So really exciting times. There was still this, like, I think, a feeling like I was on a diet. There was still feelings of deprivation. I wasn't fully free. And it wasn't my identity that I was a whole food woman or a sugar flour free. It was that I'm still in recovery. I'm still, afraid. of the desire that I know is still lingering in there for the pleasures of white chocolate chip macadamia cookies. And anyways, so
moving on.
moving right on. Okay, so you would know, Netta, if you're an addict, because there's this pushback and this kickback that is just undeniable. And all of a sudden, everything gets worse because when you feel deprived from a drug that you're addicted to, the deprivation is so intense. And then the binging happens and everything just seems to get worse over time. And it's very obvious. And you start to go, what is going on here? Like, I'm a really intelligent, motivated, I was a long distance runner and a triathlete, and I was a university professor with all kinds of mojo, and I could do whatever the hell I want, mostly, more or less. I could just make passionate decisions and follow through on it. And I could not do that with sugar. It was different. So for you, sugar consumers fall into three categories. People who use sugar, which is probably the vast majority of the planet because it's in everything, hard to avoid. Sugar abusers, people eating way too much sugar and flour, and it's damaging their health and mental health. And then there's sugar addicts. And we're about 18 to 15% of the population. Early science, although Dr. Vera Tarman will say, I call bullshit on that. I think way more people are addicted to sugar because it gets us so young, right? That exposure alone can sort of make our bodies more physiologically addicted than what we're kind of seeing in mice and rats. But regardless, we're the tip of the iceberg and we're unique. And we have and the difference between a sugar user, a sugar abuser, and a sugar addict, well, in particular, the sugar abuser, someone who's overeating, consuming sugar and flour, and someone who's addicted, is that the sugar and the flour more quickly and more intensely impacts our brain chemistry. It's one hell of a drug in an addict. It is very fast, within seconds, and deeply pleasurable. Like it deeply impacts, the rise of feel-good neurotransmitters. So, I mean, if it doesn't do that, if it's not going to make you feel good really quickly, really nice response time, and really intensely, you're never going to become addicted to it. If it leaves you flat, what are the odds you're going to become addicted to it? Nothing. If it's just a little bit of a lift, but it's not too crazy, you could let it go and replace it with something like in your case, then you're probably solidly in the second camp, right?
Probably. And yet we never really experiment what it's like not having sugar because we're always having it. And then when I stopped to, dropped it to zero, it was the first time in my life that I ever experienced not eating sugar.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden in your case, you're like, oh, I like this better.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And totally unexpected.
Right. I wish my story was that easy. Mine was a 26-year journey to freedom, but I got there, thank God. And certainly I was getting better over those decades too. I wasn't like, where I was when I started in my 20s. So Jack taught me that there's these two parts of us in the mind of an addict. So there's the wise mind, or the observer self, or the true self. Some people might say it's the soul or the spirit or the higher self. Doesn't matter. The whole process has been me just being guided by this passion to help others avoid the suffering that we all experience. So so I volunteered on Facebook. I said, anyone is sugar addicted, want to sort of be my guinea pig? I want to try and teach this technique. So I did it for free, and then I did a group coaching program, and I kept doing my summits, and I got better and better at it. And so now it's what I do full time. It's my whole world.
Amazing. And such good work, I mean, were you surprised by the number of people that came to see you and that basically are addicted to sugar?
I don't think so. I think because since my 20s, I had, at first I was like the preacher, like I was evangelical, annoying, shut up, Florence, we don't care about sugar, you're crazy, and then I realized, oh man, this needs to be deeply personal before I start preaching. I need to get, my own genuine, authentic freedom before I start preaching around to other people about what they're eating. And I got that. And then I move forward into just, if people come to me, I'm happy to help them get free, but I just know that most of the world's addicted because I've looked through the lens of sugar, and I look in the grocery stores, look at what people are putting on, putting through the till, and look at how they look. We don't look good right now. We really don't. And it makes me sad. And when I see kids in particular and young adults, I'd already looked like, people in their 50s and 60s, like just overweight and miserable. You can see it. It just breaks my heart. So I think that if you right now in your home, if you could swing a pendulum like 10 blocks around your house, there's probably 100 people that are suffering in silence, not even knowing that what's causing their misery is refined carbohydrates, their diet. So I think it's rampant and it's everywhere. But I am surprised by how much in the last six years this topic has exploded. I waited my whole life for this moment, my whole lifetime, really, when you think about it. Yeah. From my teens, when I first started to get it out of my diet because I was really overweight, and my 20s when I read the Sugar Blues, it's like I've waited my whole life for this time in history. It's really cool.
It is cool, yeah, and it's moving and shaking right now for sure. And you're part of that moving and shaking because you've got your Kick Sugar Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming one and about the Success Story Summit as well, just before we finish up?
Yes, absolutely. So the Kick Sugar Summit is an annual event that we're doing this year, October 12th, 2021. And we interview world experts and we talk about the science and strategies, the insights and the inspiration people need to break up with sugar, to really become whole food men and women. Now, can some people moderate? By moderate, I mean just little tiny bits here and there. They can. And, it's probably not going to kill them, to be honest, if you're truly not an addict. If you're an addict, it just keeps you crazy. You just never get to the freedom that Netta and I are talking about. So the freedom is way better than Black Forest cake. But so if you're not an addict, but you're a user abuser, then absolutely, mostly eat whole foods. And if you occasionally have a piece of pie or Christmas cake or birthday cake or something, you're not going to die, right? That's not what's going to kill you. It's the unrelenting, 3 meals a day, snacks in between that's going to catch up with you very quickly in really nasty ways. So we interview these experts. It's 100% free. It's online. You just go to kicksugarsummit.com. You can sign up right now. Actually, we're already taking registrations. And after that, I always do a really cool webinar. I think I'm the only summit that does this, is I take the highlights of all of the speakers. So I have volunteers who summarize all of the speakers and we put it in this little ebook. It's like the Coles notes, because not everybody's going to catch everybody. We have so many people that want to be on our summit. And even though we're saying no, as much as we can, this summit is the biggest one we've ever done. So I can't say no because they just keep coming. I'm like, oh, we got to make room for this person. So you're not going to catch them all, and that's okay. So what you do is you catch what you can. You'll get an ebook when you come to my webinar, and I will literally hit the highlights of every speaker. So I used to be a professor. I love to teach. It's actually my favorite thing. So I teach the core insights of the summit. And then after that, you'll have some options to sort of get support. And many of our speakers are coaches and scientists and doctors, and there's all kinds of resources there you can tap into. So that said, but we also are going to be doing a Sugar Success Story Summit, and Netta is going to be one of our Sugar Success Stories. Yeah. And your interview is amazing. So you absolutely have to check out Netta's interview. And it's just everyday ordinary people who some way or another stumbled into their sugar freedom and are just willing to share their story of what it was like when they were the sugar, what happened, what helped them get free and what their life is like now, kind of thing, just like Netta does with us. And that's going to be, well, at this point, it looks like it's going to be late December, maybe early January, just in time for the new year to help people start off 2022 as whole food men and whole food women.
Cool. Fantastic that you're bringing in experts and, on the other hand, regular people, us lay people, to show that you don't have to be a PhD in nutrition to cut sugar. You can just be a regular person, a regular consumer, and be sugar-free and happy doing that.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Florence. Fantastic talking to you.
You too. My pleasure, Netta.
Oh, wow, amazing. Florence's story is so inspiring to me because not only did she take her own health and well-being into her hands, but it was a long journey and she didn't give up. And putting her well-being first paid off. And now she's also helping other people, which I also find extremely inspiring. Even if I personally don't identify myself as a sugar addict and I eat in a more intuitive way without having to weigh or measure my food, I definitely can recognize that for Florence and thousands of people like Florence, her approach to sugar and flour and food addiction is the path to freedom. I put the link to the Kick Sugar Summit with this episode. Go check it out. And if you want to start reducing sugar, or if you've already started reducing sugar and you want to continue and really get to the heart of your relationship with sugar, why you're finding it so hard to let go, so that you can get to a place of feeling free from sugar, where you don't need it or even want it anymore, then go to aftersugarclub.com to start your life after sugar. And if this episode has been helpful for you, subscribe to this podcast and leave a review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.